All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of the 6570 Family Project Podcast. And we have Dr. Bauer on here. I am so excited to have you on this call. I've already told the listeners some about you, but first of all, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, you're so welcome. And as you can see, I am so excited to talk about this. We are going to be touching on the huge umbrella of the ADHD that we see today and that we're experiencing today in families, and what we can look for, what we can do about it when we see it, different things that we can do at home, different things we can do with experts that are going to be coming along in our village to help us, right? And so I just want to preface this, and I was talking with Dr. Bauer beforehand, and I just came from a week-long trip, skiing trip with some amazing kids, and in that trip, there was just around 30 middle and high school kids, girls, boys, and I started noticing even more. 4 of my own kids were on the trip, and then there was all these others. How many kids are getting this medication at night and in the morning, and how it affects them, and what we have to do as leaders when we're with them, when the parents aren't around, in order to help calm down some things, help streamline some behaviors and all of this. And it was really challenging at some points of this trip. And we go on these trips about every 6 months, and I just keep seeing it. And then I also see some, indications in some of my own kids, especially my youngest, and honestly in myself. And so I cannot wait to talk with you and get a little bit more about this. But before we do, I think your story is so important, and how you came to be and do what you do today. So can you give us a little bit of background on how you became this behavioral pediatrician and helping kids in this way?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. So I actually, when I was little, I wanted to be an elementary education teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew I wanted to work with kids. And then eventually, as I went into college and just discovered psychology and all of that, we're Filipino, so my mom's a nurse. She always wanted me to work in the healthcare field. So started thinking about that, and then realized, I could kind of meet that expectation for her, but also, become a physician working with kids that I loved. So I said, okay, I'll go into healthcare, but I love pediatrics. I've got to do that. So, it's just so fun, because what I love most about being a pediatrician is that I get to make these relationships with families, with their children from the get-go, and then watch them grow and, really focus on nurturing and supporting the family. Because my patient is not just the child, it's the whole family. I got to support them all.
I love that. Yes.
Yeah. And the behavioral pediatrician, I get this question all the time. Like, what is a behavioral pediatrician? And it's basically meaning that I was trained as a general pediatrician. So yes, once a long time ago, I could take care of asthma, allergies, skin rashes, all of that. But during my training, I really fell in love with and got mentored to really focus on developmental behavioral problems. So for me, I focus mostly on helping kids and families navigate roads with ADHD, anxiety, depression, and parenting issues, school problems. So that's why I called myself a behavioral pediatrician. And it just, to me, it just seems like a really good fit for kind of the things that I really love to help support families kind of navigate. And as I always tell my families, there is not a blood test and imaging study, to diagnose and say, hey, it's this. I really, when I meet kids for the first time, I tell them, how doctors have, stethoscopes, and I have one of those too. But when I meet kids for the first time, I take care of kids who think and learn a little bit differently. And I don't have a magic wand to really understand. What I need to use is my listening ears. And so I'm actually more like a detective. I need to really listen to stories, the good, the not so good, and they're never in trouble for it. I'm just trying to understand, so that way I can really help the families kind of figure out what the next steps are.
So what age do you typically work with, or all ages?
hmm I mean, pediatrics, runs the whole gamut. However,
Sure.
in my practice, I tend to focus on kids as early as 2 all the
Mm,
way up to about 15, 16.
wow. Wow.
hmm
That's amazing. And one thing, and you mentioned too, a little bit differently or a little bit abnormal. One of the things I've always told my kids, because there is so many different ways of thinking, so many different ways of behaving, right? And
hmm
I always tell my kids that normal is just a facade. Like there is no such thing as
Yeah.
normal. And I don't know why it popped into my head so long ago, but if a number 2 and a number 4 are sitting on the couch, like, are you going to serve them food and you're going to give them something a number 3 would love? But neither one of them really love that, right?
hmm
And so, anyway, I just want all the listeners too to know, and I know that based on what you do, everybody is so different, and really helping our kids understand that if they are a slant from quote unquote normal or
hmm
whatever, then great, because everybody is.
Yeah. And everybody has something they're working on. We all
Yes.
have our gifts. And I think what I love to do when I work with families is, even though my families often come to me because they want to understand why their child is struggling in certain areas. When we come to a diagnosis, and that could be a whole other topic about like labeling and all of this, but I always try to really onboard kids as early as possible, because they
Mm,
might be sitting there and they might hear me say ADHD, and even the young kids, they might be like, "Oh my gosh, what is that? Did I do something? Did I catch
right.
that? Is something wrong with me?" And I'm really trying to always think about the child's perspective, because I
Mm,
want them to not be afraid. I want them to be empowered to know it's not anything that's wrong with them. We're just going to learn how to work with their brains.
yeah, absolutely. So when parents come to you, they've obviously noticed something
Mhm.
at home. So what are some of those things that they have noticed at home that trigger them to be like, you know what? Or maybe it's a teacher that noticed something, or,
Yeah.
or someone else, maybe this is something that we should explore a little bit more. What are typically those things?
Yeah. Well, this we're seeing a lot of families coming in because we've been in this unique situation where now many
Mm,
kids had to do remote learning.
right.
Parents got a front view, front row seat to seeing how their child is thinking and learning for the first time. And a lot of parents were really concerned. It was a transition for everybody, not just the fact that we're in this like stressful pandemic where nothing was certain, right? And so some of those things that parents were talking about were like, okay, first of all, crying because they don't want to do this, like sitting, not being able to sit still, staring at a
Yeah.
screen. Um, like some of my kids their parents were telling me that the sound, because on Zoom, it all comes through the microphone and it's either loud or mute. And some kids with sensory issues that
Hmm.
were really sensitive to that. It was really hard with lots of people are talking and all of that. They're also talking about, regression. My
Mm,
kids are not sleeping well. They're not eating. They're not doing things that they used to do. What's going on? You know? Feelings of sadness. A lot of kids were also feeling very isolated and not being able to go to school, not understanding that. So there's so many different things that parents were reporting, but I think the big message, especially early on and continuing, is that parents are experts of their child. You
yes.
spend the most time with them, when something is amiss. I always tell parents not to disregard that mommy radar, you know, um, and to just talk about it. And I think it can be really overwhelming when all of a sudden now you have 24-hour kind of all this data of what you're taking in, and you're like, I don't even know where to focus. Like, how do I
Right.
even distill this down for you? And I only have 15 minutes or whatever, right? So, helping families navigate that so that they can feel empowered to just bring up what they're seeing, and then the pediatrician can sort of help them figure out what the next steps are.
Mm. So really just coming alongside the parent and not just focusing on the child, but like you said, it's more of a holistic family view that you have and that you work with.
Right. And starting with like any changes from baseline, because
Mm,
you know how your child was before. If you're
right.
seeing any change in different areas, that's going to be important to know.
Mm. And yeah, I think definitely the pandemic kind of put families under this microscope. So, which I find really interesting. I've homeschooled my kids for 7 years now. So I was, I did homeschool before it was, pandemic cool. But it's always been interesting because that was one of the biggest things that we noticed in homeschooling our kids. So my youngest was in kindergarten. I had two in second grade, and then I had one in fifth grade. And especially the younger ones, when I was with them all that time, we started picking up on the very early roots of perfectionism
Mhm.
or really comparison, unhealthy competitiveness, lying even in order to, cover up something, and behavior, like really teaching them how to uh, turn inward and focus, finding how they can focus too, not just, you must sit here, you must do this, like what helps you focus. We have a whole bin downstairs of manipulatives, so they can, do things as they're doing this, but also you got to be careful not to trigger the sister next to you.
Who's distracted by that?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. It's so funny. Like my youngest daughter, she would be perfectly happy bouncing on a ball the
Uh-huh.
entire, school time that we have as a group. That would drive her sisters and probably me crazy because it's not just the visual, it's also the sound of the rah, 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 And
Hmm.
so, yeah, the balance is hard. And I feel for teachers that have 20 something students in their classrooms and they're trying to figure it all out, but they also don't have that intuition or authority and influence of a parent. And
Yes.
so that's really difficult. And I feel for those teachers.
Yeah.
um so, and like this weekend I've going through and seeing all of these. So how so what are some things that we can do at home? Like maybe we're starting to notice a couple of things. What are some, just tips or explorations that we can do, questions that we can ask them that might start to open this door to see if this is even something that we need to, a rabbit hole we need to go further down, or maybe they're just having an off day, off week, or what
Yep.
have you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think the first is I'd like to at least tell you and the listeners about this is that I was at the spokesperson on behalf of the American Academy of Pediatrics a couple of years ago with Understood.
Mm,
Um, there was a Take Note campaign. So NOTE, that stands for Notice, Observe, Talk, and Engage. And it was really meant to help empower families to know that if they're starting to see any issues, to first like take notes of these things. Like,
mm,
what are you seeing, documenting, thinking about when I'm seeing a family and wanting to know more and get a good behavioral history? Some of the questions that I'm going to be asking are, when did it start?
mm.
How often is it happening? How does it affect the child? How does it affect the family or siblings? And what makes it better? What makes it worse? Like, what have you tried? Those are some of the basic things that we sort of go into when I'm trying to understand, a certain issue that the parent or child brings up. So I would always recommend to families, like, if you can, just sort of take like very quick record, or just kind of see for trends or anything like that. Because you mentioned something like, how do I know if it's just a bad day or,
Right.
an off day or off week? That's how we're going to know.
Mhm.
Again, you are the expert of your child. If this is something that's persisting, it's different from what they normally are doing, you know that something's amiss. Like, no concern is too small or too big. I mean, I think that's what I want families to know, is that you pediatricians are there to be able to talk to you about these things. We want to know those things. So notice is the first one.
Mm.
Observe is also, so that's part of that. So notice and observe. So stopping to think and then like kind of like really like looking in and kind of thinking like, was it after not eating? Was it that we were on a Zoom call for a couple hours and they were just kind of tired, or you just had a bad day? So kind of thinking about all those different things and just making quick notes, because what we want to look for are trends. And then also talking to the respective people that you need. So talking to your child, talking to teachers, talking to daycare provider, whoever is involved in your child's care, because they can see your child in different settings, because
Right.
that's going to be important for pediatricians to distinguish. Is this more than just a parenting issue? Right? I mean,
Mhm.
is it like a relationship interaction issue, or is it something that's affecting the child in multiple environments across multiple people? Those are some of the things that we also kind of need to think about and look at. Is it a child's temperament? You know, hopefully, ideally, the pediatrician is like has followed your family for a while, and so they kind of can understand. Like, is your child kind of trend towards perfectionism or things like that? Are they more slow to warm up or flexible? So sometimes some of these are just manifestations of what's normal. But again, thinking through that with the family, was there a stressor that happened, you
Yeah.
know? So these are a lot of the things that I'm thinking about when I'm meeting with families to try to, kind of follow the clues and not jumping to conclusions.
Right. And I find it interesting because I mean, that's how I do everything.
Mm-hmm.
I observe, I take notes, and I research, and and sometimes that research is just sitting there and observing. I was just telling my kids the other day, I took this anthropology course in college, and I had to go to some zoo. I think it was the St. Louis Zoo, and I had to observe for like 6 hours this gorilla. And my kids were like, 6 hours? You just sat there and watched? And I was like, yeah, you just watch and see what
Yes.
happens and take notes and everything. But anyway, that was just kind of funny. They were like, what? You just sat there for 6 hours? Could you go to the bathroom? It's just that's funny. I used to work in the animal world. So their idea, I was watching a beluga give birth once, and that was a much longer observation period. So
Yes.
anyway, but with these observations, I think as a parent, because just as the kids are getting bombarded 24/7 in social world today, so are parents. And it is that plus responsibility, a whole lot of responsibility, right? And so it's very easy. What I've found is it's very easy for parents to just be like, in survival mode, right? We survived
Yes.
another day. They're okay. They're in bed. Check the box. Mental, emotional. They seem like, I think they smiled a couple times today. So when I asked them, they said they were, we call it the F word, the fine, right? They said they were fine. So everything is fine. So we're in bed. Everything's good. And it's really easy for a lot of our kids to slip below the radar and be
Yes.
having all of this manifestation of these issues that are cropping up
Mm-hmm.
because of that. And it just is the world we live in, but having that really intentional mindset as a parent to be like, whoa, 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 like, are we actually are okay? Like, are we not just okay? Are we actually good? Like, are they thriving? And the whole point of childhood is to teach them. It's their training ground for adulthood. So
Yes.
that's what we're moving toward, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so when I put on my observation hat with my kids a long time ago, I mean, I'm talking like 10 years ago or so, they're now 12, 14, 14, and 16. So when I put that on a long time ago, I really realized that big amounts of sugar and particularly food coloring
Mm-hmm.
was a very big trigger for them. And then anything, if they were having, you know, we go out, we have ice cream, or, we do things, and, the kids are allowed a sweet a day. We have like these little chocolate nuggets in the freezer that we keep or whatever. But we totally nixed food coloring about 10 years ago for the
Yeah.
family.
Yep.
And I noticed over the weekend, my word, there was a snack shack there, and these kids are going there. and everything that they were taking in was bright blue, bright red, bright yellow, bright green,
Yep.
all these things. And I was just cringing on the inside, and I would say something, a couple of times, but some of those kids on the bus found out that my kids don't eat food coloring, and they were like, Miss Nellie, your kids aren't allowed to have candy. And I was like, no, our kids can have candy. Like, we have chocolate, right? We have chocolate,
Mhm.
we have candy. They're not like eating rice and beans for every meal or anything like that. But these kids were so shocked. And my kids are like, yeah, no food coloring, bad for the brain,
Yeah.
And so it was just really eye-opening for me to again see all of this food coloring coming in, all of this, which of course comes with the sugar as well. But and then these kids being so shocked that my kids do not eat food coloring.
Yeah.
So on that route, I know that's
Uh-huh.
just one of them, but what are some other things that you can see that are contributing environment or nutrition wise to this surge that we're seeing? And are you even seeing a surge, or do you think it's pretty plateaued?
No, I mean, I will say that ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, it's the most common neurodevelopmental condition that pediatricians are going to encounter.
Right.
Okay. But it, 6.1 million children and teens between the ages of 2 and 17 have ever been diagnosed with ADHD.
Mm.
But the pandemic has really amplified it, and then have brought families in earlier for possible concerns.
Yeah.
Okay. What makes this challenging is that there's not one cause to ADHD. Probably a lot of different things. You've mentioned a couple, sugar, artificial dyes. Certainly there are dietary factors to consider. So I love that, first of all, that you observed and then were proactive to kind of try that experiment at home to kind of eliminate, and then you actually saw some changes, right?
Definitely.
There are a subset of kids that are super sensitive to that. So it's not necessarily going to work for everybody, but it is something that we talk about, because that is something that if you're committed to trying to decrease the every other factor that could be contributing, absolutely. But you've got to do it for everybody. You can't just do it for one person in the family, because it doesn't work. But yes, sleep, huge. Also, poor sleep, that's another thing as a pediatrician I'm always asking families about, not just the quantity of hours of sleep, but the quality, because we know that if you're not getting great sleep, that can affect how you concentrate, your mood, your emotion regulation ability, right? So again, that's one thing that we always try to nurture with our kids who just in general, but if they have attention and learning differences, we need to empower them to know that these are some self-care strategies that they can take with them into adulthood, because they need to kind of do what they can for themselves to set up their day to be a success.
Right. Being self-advocates. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So sleep. Also, there's been a lot of discussion about gluten and all of those too. Right. And again, it's really hard to kind of put a blanket over that. Again, I think it falls into if there is that correlation, it's usually a small to moderate change if you do really work on it for attention and learning,
Yeah.
There's also this myth that bad parenting, and I just want to say, no, it's not, or like, did I do something, right? So no. And then, prematurity, tobacco smoke, those are other things that also can contribute. And the research has shown that can contribute to attention and learning difficulties later. So prematurity and exposure, because that brain is developing, and it's that critical window during pregnancy that can affect certain things. And then now there's a lot more science around what we call adverse childhood experiences. Have you heard of this term, or ACEs?
Yes.
So we know that not everything is nature, but also nurture. And these things are super important to understand the context, because we know that depending on when it happened in childhood, the severity as well as the frequency kids react to these adverse childhood experiences with stress, and toxic stress, meaning chronic exposure, even low levels, can
Mm,
change brain development,
yeah.
can reset your child's like threshold
Mm,
for regulation, attention. And think about it, when you are under stress, your body goes into fight, flight, or freeze mode.
right.
And you are just kind of surviving. And so what we see as parents or teachers, we just see the behavior or the symptom. It's up to your team and everybody, including the parent and child, to really kind of put together everything that we're seeing to understand, is this ADHD? Is this anxiety? Is this trauma? Is this other things that can mimic ADHD?
Right.
And potentially this child can have all these things, but we really want to get clear on what are those other things happening that could be contributing to what we're seeing.
Yeah. And I think that touches on something that I am so, I think is so important, and a pedestal I stand on for sure is the partnership between parent and child.
Yes.
And above all, I think that those two need, or three, whatever, need to come together. And as a family come together, I really, really look at the family as a team. And if, there's 6 of us in our family, and if something's going on with one of us, then we all come together and support that person that is going through that, whether that is me or one of my kids. My husband and I are the captains of this team,
Mhm.
but there's times that I need stuff too. And it's been a beautiful road to be able to see, me now with, having older-ish kids, between 12 and 16, that when I'm having a bad day and things, I'm just like, you know what? I don't have to hide it. I can just be like, you know what, guys, I'm having a really tough day. This happened today. I'm just kind of feeling down. And they rally. And it's beautiful to see, because I know that sometime down the line, they're going to have somebody else that needs something, and they can rally around them. Right. And again, that teaching. But when you're talking about the parent and child coming together to figure out a solution,
Mhm.
that's warms my heart. And it's so important, because then it isn't the parent saying my child is a victim and I need to fix this before they know anything too much about it. Right. Because I've seen
Right.
that too,
Yes.
where the parent is kind of like secretively changing things behind the scenes, and we're just going to go here, oh, that's fine or whatever, and we're just going to go here and talk to this person, but not being really honest about what's going on. And that honesty is great. It is, I care about you and love you, and I want to set you up for great success in life. So
Mhm.
let's do this together. Right. That
Oh,
would be
yeah.
that's a great truth.
Oh,
But
it's so true. Yeah.
yeah, but so many parents are,
They want to shield them. They want to,
yes,
like,
yes,
they want to protect them. And I get that
totally
too.
get it. Yeah.
I get it. However, so can I comment on something that you
Please.
said?
Yes.
Like, you said, as a family, we rally together. I mean, that's beautiful. That's empathy. We want our kids, like, you can teach and cultivate that. You want
Mm,
them to be able to sort of reflect on the fact that other people have feelings and thoughts, and be mindful of that, and then be spurred to take action to help,
right.
right?
Right.
So that's wonderful. And then also, I think too, is when I, and thank you for bringing that up, because when I see a family for the first time, I often will ask parents, or I'll ask the child, I'm like, do you know why you're here today? What did you hear about me? Do you know why you're here? I think it's so interesting. And I always first talk with the child first. Even if the
Mhm.
parents are there, I'll
Yeah.
actually say hello to the child. Hey, how are you? What's your name? I'm Dr. Bauer. And who did you bring here today? So, right. And because I really want them to know that this is for them. And I always go through my spiel of, this is a safe place. I'm not a doctor that gives shots. I know that, some doctors do, but I just don't want you to be worried about that, because I'm not that kind of doctor. And they're like, okay, good. Like, so
Phew.
yeah, woo. But I think it's so important to get buy-in from the child, because what I tell families all the time, and that's going back to my detective analogy,
Mhm.
I don't have a magic wand. I can't like just x-ray their brains to know what they're thinking and feeling, and what they think and feel matters to everybody. We're
Yeah.
here as to come together to figure out how to help you just feel better,
Yeah.
so that things aren't as hard. But the only way that I can do that is really understanding how they're thinking and feeling.
Right.
And I said, when you begin to feel safe with me and or anybody else on this team, like that's what we're trying to help, kind of activate and empower the child to be able to be
Mm,
like, this is how I've been feeling. This is what I like. This is what I don't like.
yeah.
So, I would hope that those conversations start at home too, because it's so important to just engage
Yeah.
with your child and invite them. Their voice matters.
Yeah. Um, I was sitting on the couch with my youngest last night, and she's a mover. She's always moving, and she's 12, and she's just always been this way. And she, like, her brain works so fast that sometimes her words come out as total slurs. And I can't tell you how many times a day we have to tell her, slow down and say the whole word. And then
Yes.
she will, but then like 2 minutes later, it's like,
Mhm.
and so anyway, I'm sitting on the couch with her last night, and she's moving, and she's sitting right next to me. And one of my personal triggers is small repetitive movements. And so that just like, I don't deal well with that. I'll put it that way. But and then she is a small repetitive movement, my daughter. so so she's sitting next to me, and we have this big old couch, and I was like, Journey is her name. I was like, Journey, I just really need you to sit still or move over a little bit, just so you're not, rub. It's like the smallest repeated rub against my arm, and that's my sensory issues right there. And, but she was like, I always have to move, Mom. I love moving. And I was like, I know, but I don't. And so I need you to move over a little bit. And it's just so funny to see all these different kids that I have. I have one that does have sensory issues, had to cut out all the tags and
Tags.
everything. Yes, when
Mhm.
she was little. And then I have one that is just super sensitive, actually like reactionary sensitive to things, which has made her mentally sensitive to things,
Yes.
and so her skin is very reactive. And so then she's like, oh, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could do that. So she gets sensitive that way. But anyway, my whole point being, all of our kids are very different. All of our kids think very different, but if we can help them learn how to manage their own thoughts with ourselves or with a team of someone amazing like you, then they will be so much better set up for life. But before we go, because I think we could talk on this for hours, but before we go, I want to know if there is any, so just besides note, which I love, the notice, observe, talk, and engage. Um, when you first start seeing something at home, what are some of those first things that you can do? Maybe a question or so that you can ask your kid, or someone that you can reach out to. Would your pediatrician be the first person to reach out to?
Yes. Yes. Would be. But I think if you feel comfortable talking
Hmm.
with your child, like
Yeah.
just start that conversation and say, you know what, I've noticed, and use the like
Mm,
I've noticed that the past couple of days you've been a little bit more quiet, or you've been having a hard time sitting still. Like, how is that for you? Like, have you noticed that too? What's
mm,
going on? I'm just kind of curious there. It just seems a little different, a little
yeah.
off. So again, you're showing them that you're noticing and observing,
Right.
and then engaging them, inviting them to sort of say. Some younger kids might be like, I don't know, just how I got to move, right?
Right.
Right. But that's okay. I mean, but you can at least normalize those conversations. What I love about what you said to your daughter, like, I need you to move over here, right? Instead of you just getting frustrated and just showing it, talking to them and sharing and role modeling how to express your inner thoughts is so important.
Yeah.
By showing them that, okay, I'm feeling this way, but this is how I share to you respectfully how I'm thinking and feeling, because nobody can read each other's minds.
Right. Exactly.
You're modeling that for your kids to be able to say, you know what, today I'm just having an off day. I just need some time alone. It's okay. But
Yep.
I'd rather hear that, right, than sort of make assumptions, or kind of get kind of defensive. I think having that two-way communication is so key, and getting in
Yeah.
touch and inviting those feelings and modeling that.
Yeah. And being specific in your questions. I was just writing something for some of my clients, and instead of saying, hey, is everything okay? And then they say,
Mhm.
yeah. or everything's fine. And then moving on, right? Being specific, like those questions that you just asked, I've noticed this specific thing happening. How do you feel in this specific thing? Because that opens the door so much more for a communication than
Yes.
this big wide range. How is everything in your life going? And you're like,
Right.
good. Because I can't talk about everything in my life right now. So I'm just going to
Right.
say good and fine so I can move on from this
Well,
conversation.
and I'm going to piggyback really quickly because I know we're going to wrap up. But like if families hear from a teacher, hey, so-and-so had a really bad day today. This is what happened. Don't just like when your child comes home, don't just say, so how was your day? And then they're like, fine. And then you're going to be like seething and you're like, I know it wasn't fine. So don't start those conversations that way. Okay. Like just say, so honey, I heard from your teacher that this happened. I'd like to know more. Let's, get a snack. And again, I just need to understand what was happening there. So that way I can help figure out and, if it's going to happen again, what you could do instead, or how you can ask for help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So just like going there and right. I mean, that's
not making them the bad kid. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, because again, when kids act out, whether it be yelling, crying, having a meltdown, shutting down, whatever, however they're showing it, I always tell parents, this is their way of telling you they need help.
Right. Yep.
I mean, at least they're trying, but as a parent, you need to recognize that our kids might not have a way to know how to communicate that. They might not know. So when you ask them, what's happening? I don't know. Like, I'm just having been like, right. But they might not know. But again, the fact that you're tuning in and inviting a conversation is important. And it also helps parents because they can hopefully not take it personally and just learn to say, okay, I see my child is struggling right now. I need to help them figure out how to navigate this strong emotion so that we can get back to calm and then have a discussion, problem solve, and move forward.
Yes. Yes.
So.
Oh my goodness. Well, this was such a great call. I have a page of notes right here and I love it. So thank you so much for being on the show, first of all.
Yes.
And then can you tell our listeners where we can find your genius out there?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'd love to connect with anybody and everyone who just thought that this was helpful. And if you have questions, please reach out. My website is called letstalkkidshealth.org. Nice. And there you'll find out information about me and everything that I offer. I do a weekly show on both Facebook and YouTube. So I bring experts and guests to just help me demystify behavioral health and parenting issues. So I think it's important that we all talk together. That's why it's called Let's Talk Kids Health.
Yes.
And then I do a free parenting book club about 4 to 6 times a year where we read a common book out there. And then I've been inviting the authors to come so that way you can ask them questions. And then lastly, I also have developed these jumpstart kits and a class for kids with ADHD to take with their parent called Teach Me ADHD. Again, where you become junior and senior detectives and you take the class with other families so that kids, first of all, can see that they're not different, weird. They can see other kids just like them. And then we do family missions and deeds. You send evidence to headquarters and get feedback and just support from an amazing community. So, and it's just so that kids can learn about ADHD so that they can learn to embrace it and know that it's not something scary. They will learn everything they need to know about like a treatment plan. And then, that ADHD is their superpower.
Yes. Yes. I have to say, do you, have you heard of the Holderness family at all?
Oh,
Do you
yes.
watch that? Okay. Yes. We're huge Holderness family
We are
fans.
too.
Okay. Awesome. So yeah, I absolutely love Kim and Penn. We live close-ish to them, in North Carolina. So anyway, yeah, I just wanted to say, cause they're always saying that. Yes. I've been watching them for years and I'm so proud of them. Love that.
I love that they're using their platform to sort of share this, right?
Yes.
So we just need to keep talking about this. We need to keep talking about it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on. I can't wait to connect again.
Yes. You know where to find me. And it's so great. Thank you for doing the work that you do. I think it is so important to sort of just know that this time of life, it goes fast, but some moments it feels slow. But again, I think that as parents, we play such a valuable role in helping shape our children into these successful, thriving young adults who are going to be ready to launch. And everything that happens in the home is that safe space. So there are going to be pitfalls, there are going to be mistakes, but as long as you can kind of reframe it as learning opportunities, you'll be just fine.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I can't close it out any better than that. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the 6570 podcast, Family Project podcast. And we will be back with another episode next week.